All right. Good morning, everybody. As you guys were told, my name is Jason Taylor. I am the Medical Exercise Program Coordinator here at Capital Health. Uh, my title has at least one too many words in it, which is for sure. Um, as stated, I am basically one of the people in charge here as far as developing and the implementation of different wellness initiatives, both for our patient bases and our employee bases. Everything from exercise classes to uh, medical weight loss programs, some seminars that we put on, everything like that. So my job is pretty much strictly to put as many different outlets for information and practice as far as fitness and nutrition is concerned that we can. All right. So today I'm going to talk to you guys about exercise for people over 60, why it's important, considerations to make, just a little bit of everything. So basically, I'm going to hit on five or six major topics, and then I'm going to leave you guys with just some little tips that you guys can use to follow out after the presentation. All right. So let's get started. So, all right. So the first reason that we're going to stress the importance of exercise when you're over 60 is the obvious: maintaining health and disease prevention, right? So why? How does it do this? What is the mechanism of action? How can I sell you on, exercise if you're not already doing it, or increasing the amount of exercise that you're doing if you're already doing it? Why should you listen to me? So we know that exercise helps control our weight, right? And we know scientifically that weight control is one of the most common links to heart disease, diabetes, and other metabolically induced diseases. Metabolically induced meaning that we have a large amount of control over these diseases based on our habits with fitness and nutrition. Yes, genetics play a major role. You can certainly be given a bad luck of the draw genetically, especially when it comes to things like uh, cholesterol and things like that. But at the same time, these things can very much so be controlled by our habits and our daily activities. So we know that exercise helps control weight. Weight is highly linked to heart disease, diabetes. Usually if somebody has one thing wrong on their blood work, let's say, it's not just one thing. It's usually three or four different things that are all linked back to carrying excess weight. All right. Once again, exercise aids in lipid control, meaning cholesterol, triglycerides, also aids in blood pressure being the silent killer, right? It's hard on our heart. It's very hard on our kidneys. A lot of people go with undiagnosed blood pressure issues for years, and then they find out that they have very damaged kidneys. We know that opening up those blood vessels and making them less constrictive and increasing that, reducing that blood pressure can really help to keep both our heart and kidneys in check. So we definitely want to keep lipid panel in control as far as triglycerides and cholesterol. I think we all hear that those are pretty important for heart health. Obviously we don't want blocked arteries and things like that. And then obviously blood pressure having some negative effects without really, even thinking about it. So next is just cardiovascular endurance and cardiovascular output, right? So cardio output, that can be measured through, medical testing with, ejection fractions and things like that. And we obviously want to, stay as healthy and in normal range as possible. But cardiovascular endurance in sense of, just being able to, do the activities that you want to do without running out of steam. So, a lot of what I'm going to harp on today is really harping in the sense that I think everybody wants to stay independent for as long as they possibly can in life. I don't think anybody wants to be an early admittee to, a care facility or have to rely on their kids to move them in with them or move back home to take care of them or something. I think a lot of us want to remain as independent as possible and enjoy the things that we've enjoyed for their entire life. So whether that's walking the beach or boardwalk down the shore or, going for bike rides or things like that, if it's cut short because you simply don't have the endurance for it, well then, you're missing out on something that you enjoy. So, to actually push yourself to exercise to make sure that you can maintain those activities is very important, in my opinion, not just for physical health, but mental and emotional health as well. And the final thing that I'll touch on, as far as like the maintaining health and disease prevention is just the short-term illness prevention that is improved from, having a stronger immune system that builds up from exercise and things like that. So, getting that blood flow and getting that heart pumping, that builds our immune system. It kind of helps us fight off just those short-term illnesses, those colds, those sinus infections, things like that. It gives us a better, it puts our body in a better place to fight off those things, so they don't become a major ailment. It doesn't become something that is, hospital worthy or something like that. So, all right, we are going to move on and we're going to talk about the importance of muscle retention as we age and the effect that it has on metabolism, okay? So as we age, basically when we get over the age of 30, for some people it could be later, maybe let's say 40. So between the age of 30 and 40, muscle atrophy, which is, the loss of muscle or the shrinkage of skeletal muscle, is natural unless we combat it with resistance training, all right? We can basically send our body the signal to fight off this atrophy, this withering away of skeletal muscle by resistance training, aka, weight training or using body weight exercises that, stress the muscle in a good way. Why is this important? So one thing is we want to maintain as much strength as possible, right? Like there's a correlation with how much skeletal muscle we have on our body and how strong we are. We've known this for 100 plus years at this point, that larger muscles are stronger than smaller muscles. That's, I don't think I'm really blowing anybody's mind here. I think that, this is kind of some known knowledge. But harping back to what I kind of just finished with on our first slide is, having that strength is what is going to allow us to remain active and capable, right? So, I mean, I could go and say that, playing golf or tennis in the summertime is something, but even something as simple as, opening jars in the kitchen and things like that, these all go back to, being capable of being independent, living the way you want to live, not having any barriers in the way of doing what you want to do, even though you are over 60. It doesn't really matter, okay? We want to do everything we can to combat muscle loss. It's a naturally occurring thing unless we fight it off, all right? The other part of this is it's, reverting back to weight control. Muscle is very important for our metabolism, okay? So if you didn't know this, every pound of muscle that you have on your body, just skeletal muscle, equates to 50 calories a day burned at rest. So if you lose 2 pounds of muscle a year just from natural muscular atrophy, you are losing 100 calories a day per year off of your metabolism. Well, that makes it harder to stay at a healthy weight, to stay at a healthy body fat percentage, you're making it harder on yourself to, to keep that good body composition that we're aiming to maintain for health. Um, so you just think about the addition versus subtraction. If you were to add 2 pounds of muscle or just save 2 pounds of muscle from withering away, then, here we are. We're 100 calories a day in a better place. That's 700 calories a week. That's 35,000 calories a year difference burned by just having 2 pounds of muscle. Okay. So that's how important maintaining muscle can be in the long term. Okay. And finally, we're going to kind of transition here, but having that strength that comes from muscle is also a critical part of fall prevention, which is obviously something that is, talked about heavily in the senior community. We don't want to take falls. They're tougher to recover from the older we get. So we're going to transition into that. All right. So fall prevention. As your body ages, you often lose muscle and flexibility in your joints. That means that you're more likely to have difficulty with your balance, and you could take a fall more easily than when you are younger. Okay. Once again, if we combat that loss of muscle, that's one battle won. We're one battle closer to negating this fall risk. Okay. Unfortunately, as I kind of transitioned and said, the consequences of falling as we become older, get a lot more serious. Recovery can take a longer time when you're 65 than when you're 25. I think we all know that. It's just one of those facts of life. It might not be able to repair itself, your body, in the same way that it used to. So, not only does the fall, hurt and create an injury or damage or whatever, but it's also the recovery time to get back to normal. If you can even get back to normal, is going to be longer and a more hard-fought road than when you were younger. So if we could stay upright, that should be the goal. Exercising in the senior population is a great way to maintain muscle mass and flexibility. It has a huge impact on your balance and your coordination, which means you can lower the chance of having a fall. That's another thing, right? So a lot of exercise increases your hand-eye coordination. You might not think it in the moment, but I mean, everything that you do in exercise for the most part is done with a thought behind it, an intent, a purpose, and you are mentally commanding a limb or multiple limbs of your body to perform in a certain movement pattern, right? So, that's why there are 1,000 different exercises in our wide world encyclopedia of exercises, because they work different muscles at different angles in different ways, and they all require you to have that neurological control of that muscle. Hence, every time that you exercise and you perform said exercises, you're developing that connection between your brain and the muscles that need to fire, the joints, and the way that they need to articulate. So we're always improving our hand-eye coordination with exercise as well. Even if you haven't thought about it that way in the past, it's something to think about, going forward, especially with fall prevention. All right. All right. So now we're going to get, I felt like this transitioned well from that last part where we talked about that mind to muscle connection and controlling our limbs. So cognitive function. So exercise works our motor skills. It plays a key role in improving cognitive function. Using your brain during physical activities, your brain remains more active in general. This is why people who stay active have a lower chance of developing Alzheimer's or dementia. This is something that is proven in study. This isn't just logic. This is something that, you could go on Google Scholar yourself and you could pull a million different, articles about, the connection between people that stay physically active via exercise and, how that population always has a lower chance at Alzheimer's, dementia, and things like that. Um, you know, Something as simple as blood flow, right? Like blood flow is kind of the catalyst of, you know, how can I say this? It's the transporter of nutrients, right? So the better our circulation is, and that really kind of comes from movement and exercise and not being stagnant all day, kind of keeps all the different areas of our body well fed. Anything from our organs, like our brain, to our muscle tissue and so on. Having that good circulation is always going to be a positive. Um, Try doing a few different activities, just to kind of keep your brain active. I've told people two schools of thought with this. If you're a non-exerciser now, I really don't care if you really have, go right out today and have a variety of different exercise modalities that you start doing on a weekly basis. I would say that I would be equally impressed as if you just found one thing that you liked and could stick to it. Um, and then if you wanted to broaden your horizons, but what I mean by this is yoga, dance, step aerobics, they all work effectively, but they all work in different ways, right? And they all provide you with a variety of ways that they're going to benefit your body. Just like there's a difference between resistance training and cardiovascular training. That's why we have all these different modalities that help our body do different things in different ways, and that's really what we are looking to accomplish. Okay. And the final thing that I'm going to speak on is the socialization factor of exercise, right? And how important it could be. Um, it's a sad fact that roughly a third of Americans at some point report that they feel lonely or isolated at a time, and this really increases as people become either more isolated, uh, retire, or just find it more difficult to get out and about. Uh, I know it's probably not talked about as much as it should be, but post-retirement depression is a big thing that happens. People go from going out into the world every day, going into a workplace, and whether you think it's socialization or not, it is. And then you think that going home and having time to yourself all day, every day in retirement is going to be great. And then after a couple days, weeks, months, you find that you're really struggling for that socialization. And I can actually make a personal reference to this. About 3 years ago is when I came to Capital Health. Prior to that, I had what I would say is probably the most social job in the world. I was basically personal training full time. I would see as many as 10 different clients a day. So over the course of an hour of meeting with 10 different people a day, there was a lot of small talk about catching up on life, what was going on in their family life, what was going on in, travel. We would talk sports, we would talk news, we would talk everything, right? And when I transitioned here to Capital Health, because I took on a coordinator role, my time has been very split between a social aspect where I am in front of an audience, and there's times where I spend a lot of time isolated in front of a computer, sending emails, doing spreadsheets, all that kind of nonsense stuff that comes along with, a coordinator role. And I never thought it would affect me, but lo and behold, about 6 months in, I was like, wow, this is really affecting my mood. And, I just kind of had to find coping strategies to get through it. But, it is something that, definitely affects us. So, if you are somebody who is finding it harder and harder to get out, whether that's physically or due to a lifestyle change or something like that, exercise can be that outlet to get out and be social. And a lot of that is because there's a lot of fitness related activities for people in their senior years, right? So there's a lot of different group fitness classes, dance classes held everywhere from your local gym to your senior centers. A lot of your townships and communities are putting on things for the older population to exercise together. You know, it's there for the taking if you want to be proactive and get that socialization in. And there's other activities too that don't even necessarily have to be your traditional exercise modalities. A lot, like I said, a lot of these like township news flyers and things like that will have things such as walking clubs or gardening clubs. Just so you can socialize while also being active and doing something you like and whatnot is definitely enjoyable. So the very last thing that I am going to touch on is basically bone density and what you can do to keep your bone density in a healthy place. And what I'm going to say is walking, jogging, walking the stairs, dancing, and obviously resistance training, all right? But I am going to give you the list of what I think are the 5 best at home exercises that you can do that you don't even need any weights, any machines to perform and work on your bone health. So right now I would say break out your pen and paper if you're going to write this down. I'll give you 3, 2, 1. So the first movement I would say is any kind of squat variation. Any variation of a squat, I would say, holding on to something, a railing, a countertop, something like that to make sure you just feel safe with balance is good. You could squat down to a chair to make sure that, if you feel comfortable kind of having that that seat behind you to keep you be like a security blanket. You could squat to the chair. You could sit back up out of the chair, and so on, right? Number 2, it's going to be your good old-fashioned push-up. Now, I don't expect everyone to be banging out push-ups like if you were in boot camp for the U.S. Marine Corps. However, you can walk up to a wall in your house, put your hands on it, lean into it, and push off of it, and that's still a push-up. It's using maybe 30 or 40% of your body weight instead of 100% of your body weight. It's still a push-up, right? So wall push-ups are a great way to build up to a modified push-up, and a modified push-up is a great way to build up to a standard push-up, all right? So if you think you can't do a single push-up at all, start with wall push-ups, and then, shoot up to maybe a modified push-up on the floor, all right? Third is going to be a split squat. So this would be, 1 foot's forward, 1 foot's back. Once again, I would use something for balance, and I would squat down. It's great because it kind of isolates one leg at a time. So if you feel that you have one leg that's weaker than the other, you can kind of track repetitions and things like that and make sure, okay, my left leg has always been a little weaker than my right leg. So I'm going to shoot to get, if I can get 10 repetitions on my right leg, I'm going to force myself to get 10 repetitions on my left leg. That way, they're at an even pace. All right. The third is going to be, I'll call them prone movements. I'll call them bird dog variations. Bird dog kind of being like a yoga term, but basically down on all fours and extending of your limbs. So kicking out a leg, kicking out an arm, kicking out a leg or an arm simultaneously. All that is going to be one of the best things that we can do for our core, which is going to in turn be one of the best things that we can do for our balance, which we obviously stress a lot on how important our balance is. And the very last thing is going to be leg lift variations. So lying on the floor, lying on a mat, lying on the bed, being able to keep our shoulder blades and butt down on the flat surface and being able to lift our legs, whether we do flutter kicks or scissor kicks or just lift our legs together, you know, really working not only the abdominals, but also the muscles in the hips and being able to keep all those muscles firing. Once again, core strength is going to go back and hip strength is going to go back to balance. So with that, I am going to hand things over to Lonnie. She is actually going to pop onto the same computer as me. So it's just going to take 2 seconds to load up her slideshow, and then we will get right back to it. Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience and my technical difficulties. And thank you, Jason, for letting me use your computer. All right, so right now we're going to talk about proper nutrition for people over the age of 60. You guys all had a brief introduction of who I am to start, but I will recap about who I am since it's been about a half hour. My name is Lonnie. I am the dietitian over in the Wellness Center, but that encompasses a lot of things. That encompasses just the general dietitian, hosting webinars for the hospital monthly, and also I work in cardiopulmonary rehab as well as vascular rehab, working with the patients there. So I know a thing or two about working with people over the age of 60. I also do work with the employees here at the hospital. I teach the Core 4 employee wellness class. So our overall goal is to just try and get people to really live a healthier lifestyle, and everybody comes in from different, I guess, sort of starting points, but the general goal, I guess, with that class is health, and that can apply into life as well. And so when we talk about proper nutrition for people over the age of 60, that has a lot of meanings. So overall, my goal in life is to make things a lot easier for a lot of people. So I don't necessarily always go right by the book, but I do encompass everything that we should highlight for people who are aging to make sure that they have overall health, but there is a key of balance there, and I want to make sure that I highlight that too. All right, so let's get started. So I based a lot of this off the Dietary Guidelines, which had just come out about a year and a half ago, I believe, almost 2 years ago. They research, and there's a committee that puts them together every 5 years. There's about 20 scientists that are on this committee between the USDA and the Department of Health and Human Services. And truthfully, the aim with the Dietary Guidelines for Americans is to promote health and prevent disease, which is pretty all-encompassing because we know we want to make sure that our life expectancy goes up in this country. You know, people have access to affordable healthcare and affordable food because truthfully, food is a really, really big part of healthcare. If we can prevent a lot of things, then we don't have to spend a lot of money on things. Also, the guidelines focus on making good health achievable for almost everybody, no matter someone's health status. So truthfully, you can make better choices if you just shift your attention to choosing better foods and better beverages overall and making sure you're meeting your goals for your life stage. And the dietary guidelines also show how a combination of food choices, as well as eating for every stage in a person's life, can affect the health and well-being of an individual. All right, so for the guidelines, there's recommendations for all life stages. And so this is throughout, you know, there's, you know, babies to older adults, as they call them, but you want to make sure you have a balanced, nutritious diet. And we'll get more into what that means. You want to meet all your nutrient needs, maintain a healthy body weight. And I have an asterisk right there in my brain, not on the PowerPoint. And why I have that asterisk mentally on maintain a healthy body weight is that, you know, we have these metrics, BMI and ideal body weight for different heights. And not everybody is the same, you know, metrics. Not everybody's in the same life stage. Not everybody has the same body composition. And so what might be a healthy body weight for somebody at the age of 25, well, we might not see that at the age of 65 or 70. You know, I have a lot of people that come to me in cardiac pulmonary vascular rehab that say, oh my God, I want to, I'm 85 and I want to go back to when I was playing football as a 21-year-old. I'm like, fat chance, because your body composition isn't going to be, ideal for that. And you're just trying to stay healthy at this point, so weight doesn't really tell the whole picture. It's more of a composition, are you, staying away from illness, are you eating well, so on and so forth. And obviously we want to mitigate the risk of chronic disease. And that comes from an overall, big picture of healthy nutrition, exercise. All right. We obviously, so this is a big one that I focus on, that's really great to meet your needs nutritionally and via exercise, and great that you feel confident and energetic and have a good relationship with food. But, what are we doing for ourselves? What are our personal preferences, our taste preferences? What do we have traditionally within our family that we're trying to strive and eat for? What are our cultural traditions? So, are you doing something for Easter? Are you, celebrating Ramadan, where you might not be eating as much during the day? Are you, doing Rosh Hashanah if you're Jewish? There's a whole bunch of cultural traditions that play into, making sure that you fulfill your nutrition. For example, we get a big Asian population here in cardiac, pulmonary, and vascular rehab. And a lot of times it's a vegetarian Asian population, and we have to make sure that they get all of their needs in, because it's harder to do if you're a vegetarian or a vegan and trying to get protein and vitamin B12 and so on and so forth. Okay. And, also budget is a huge one. You're not going to spend $30 a week on meat. If you have $15 a week to spend on meat, you want to make sure that you can get your protein in from other more affordable sources. You want to make sure that your diet is nutrient dense. And so what does nutrient dense mean? So we've heard of words called calorie dense and nutrient dense. So when we're talking about a calorie dense diet, we're talking about a calorie like overload, or we're packing in calories. When we talk about a nutrient dense diet, we're packing in nutrients for a calorie goal that is really acceptable for our individual needs, for our life stage, so on and so forth. So we want to make sure that we're in our calorie range that's appropriate to us. And so when you see typically 25 to 30 calories per kilogram for a healthy adult, well, that's for a general healthy adult. But, if there's somebody who has a hypermetabolic illness, sometimes COPD, if they have burns or wounds, that calorie goal is going to go up. That protein goal is going to go up. So there are various needs. If I'm working with an obese patient that the main goal is strictly to lose weight versus all other things, because weight loss is going to help them get healthier, we're going to go for a lower calorie per kilogram, but we're going to make sure that we're going to get all the nutrition in that they need. And truthfully, all life stages, you should know what to limit. All right. So each added sugars and saturated fat should be less than 10% of your total calories per day. Why that is, we'll go further into this in a second, but saturated fat is bad for your heart and other things in your body, and we'll go forward. And added sugars, well, we know if we didn't pick that apple off the tree, or we didn't take the carrot out of the ground, we knew that everything else that might have been added to those things, like if you had a caramel apple or you dip that carrot in dressing, that's added sugar. All right. So just know that the more added sugars that you have, the more you're getting away from the natural food. So you're not only increasing the amount of glucose that's available in your blood at one time, but you're also adding extra calories that you might not need. All right. Sodium's a big one. We'll talk about more of like the specific nutrients as we go forward. But with sodium, you want to aim to take in less than 300 milligrams a day. And guess what? If you have trouble with your heart, like cardiovascular disease, or you're at risk for stroke, you have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and you have all those things, especially the high blood pressure, guess what? You should be taking in about 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams a day. And that 2,300 milligrams a day is a teaspoon. And that's in everything that you eat all day long, from the foods that you put in your body out of the box, to what you cook with, to what you add at the table. And we'll talk about alcoholic beverages in a second, but just know that across all life stages, there are limitations to certain things. And yes, balance and moderation is key, but we want to limit the things that we definitely know we're not supposed to have a ton of. All right, so There we go. So with older adults, and you can see my true crime obsession right there with Keith Morrison, but that's fine. But with older adults, we have common issues and illnesses, and this is just not even scratching the surface. And so I didn't put in here because this is encompassing of all of these things. Malnutrition is our biggest concern with older adults because of everything that can happen on that list. So we'll go down a few of these. We talk about loss of appetite, obviously. For anybody with loss of appetite, you're obviously not getting enough nutrition in because you're not going to want to eat as much. And as you get older, unfortunately, you lose muscle, you get a little bit weaker, you might have some bone loss, and getting up and making food or going out and buying food, sorry, that's a chore. And so you might not want to eat. There's dehydration and dry mouth and poor dentition. So dehydration, we'll talk about that, like I said, in a second. There's a whole other slide on it. But when you have dry mouth, your teeth are rotting. And then, when your teeth are rotting, you're going to end up with poor dentition, meaning loose teeth, missing teeth, gum disease, and things that would make it really hard to chew. And so it takes a lot of work to then blend your food, or people don't want food that's blended, or making softer foods. And so that becomes an issue. Medication interactions. When you're managing multiple conditions and diseases at one time, you're going to have medication interactions that might cause you nausea, that might cause you to go to the bathroom more, vomiting, things like that, poor appetite. And it can also cause you to not be able to eat certain foods. So, for example, a big medication interaction is certain blood thinners and vitamin K. And so it's not that we can't eat green leafy vegetables, but we want to moderate our intake. So if you have a serving of green leafy vegetables at lunch and you have one at dinner, you just kind of want to make sure you keep those servings consistent and you have maybe 2 servings at those same times every day. Another medication interaction is grapefruit and other similar citrus fruits with certain statins. And so you just have to be careful and make sure you read the labels on those things, but this is common. And then we have our heart issues. We have our cardiovascular disease, our high blood pressure, and stroke. Obviously this is going to change how we take in nutrition, and we're going to have to watch certain nutrients. We're going to have to decrease our sodium, decrease saturated fats and trans fats, increase our fiber, decrease saturated fat, increased omega-3 fatty acids, and increased fiber will all help bring, your lab numbers down, will help your blood sugar decrease, will help your blood pressure decrease. So it's all positive. Then we have things like diabetes, all right? And so that completely changes the diet as we get older. You have to be watching your carbohydrate intake. You have to be consistent with your carb intake. You have to make sure you're getting things that have a lot of fiber in them, all right? And then we have things like COPD emphysema, which is going to cause us to breathe off a lot more energy. We're going to need to take in more calories for those things so we can protect against muscle loss, and we can support our breathing. Things like memory loss, dementia, Alzheimer's, lifestyle changes, loss of independence, our bodily processes have slowed down. Maybe we're having sleep disturbances, vision loss. All of those things play into how much we eat, what our desire to eat is like. And so we typically think of these things as just chronic conditions, but we don't really see how they play into us when it comes to our food choices and actually wanting to eat at the end of the day. And then we have money. A lot of the older people I know, my parents included, they're retired. I mean, they don't have a steady income. Social Security will only take you so far. And yeah, there are commodity programs in the community, but truthfully, when you are concerned about when your next meal is coming in or how much you budgeted for the week, that can affect everything that you put in your mouth. All right, so let's get specific here. So we have our dietary guidelines for those over 60, all right? That's what we're talking about right now, all right? So we have females and males. They have individual needs, all right? Everybody's needs are individual. I am 5'4". If I lined up with people who are 5'4" and that look just like me next to me, we would all need different nutritional needs and calories and nutrients because everybody's different. Everybody, like I talked about, different body composition, illnesses, family history, so on and so forth. So the dietary guidelines recommend that women should take in anywhere in a range from 1,600 to 2,200 calories a day. Now that is a big jump. And that sounds like an awful lot, but truthfully, and I say this to everybody that I work with that is trying to lose weight in any capacity, you need to eat to lose weight, and you need to eat to maintain a healthy weight, all right? Not eating enough is only going to cause more issues for your body. So if anything, make sure you're at least having that 1,600 calories a day so your body can function at its most proper. Like literally just have that buffer, and you know to start, you're getting in adequate nutrition for the day. All right. For males, definitely more body composition. Males typically have more muscle. Males are typically taller, so they need more calories. All right. From 2,000 to 2,600 calories per day. And again, that all sort of determines, what determines that is by the person. So I might need, on the female end of things, 1,600 calories, and then I might be sitting right next to an athlete, which I am in Jason, but let's just say Jason was a female and he was the same size as me. All right. He would need so much more nutrition than I would because he's much more active than I am on a daily basis. You know, let's just say sitting on my other side of me, same height, same weight, I had somebody who had severe emphysema. Guess what? They're going to need severely more nutrition than I will because they're breathing and expending a lot more energy than I do on a daily basis, just so you can get more of an example of what I'm talking about. So what do we want to get in specifically throughout our day? Well, you want to get in, and these are called equivalents. Just for an example, an ounce equivalent for a whole grain is 16 ounces, but typically just aim to get these cups in every day. At least if you get the cups and the ounces in per day, or serving sizes, you know you're doing what you need to, okay? So 2 to 3.5 cups per day of veggies. Now, if you look at the graphic I have, the lower amount is going to correspond with the lower amount of calories that you get in, because our distribution numbers change. So we would need less veggies for less calories. Same thing with fruit, 1.5 to 2 cups of fruit per day. Or equivalents, so an equivalent of fruit would be 100% unsweetened whole fruit juice, dried fruit. Again, equivalents for veggies include, 100% unsweetened whole vegetable juice. If you see ounces of whole grains, 5 to 9 ounces per day of whole grains. Whole should be the first word you see, and whole grain, blah, blah, blah. Whole grain brown rice flour, whole grain oats, whole grain this and that should be the first ingredient, okay? Whole grains. If you do not have the whole grain, you are not getting the fiber, the B vitamins, the minimal minerals that we need. But even those tiny amounts of minerals are what get us through the day. All right, so whole grains. 3 cups a day of low-fat dairy. So we find saturated fats and a small amount of trans fats, which are heart unhealthy. We find them in animal fat products, like red meat and chicken thighs and turkey thighs, the breasts are lean, and like in whole milks and whole milk cheeses. All right, so we want low-fat milks. We want 1% skim. We want part skim, low-fat dairy. So choosing low-fat dairy would be important. You'll get the same protein, you'll get the same calcium, you'll get the same, vitamin D if it's added in. And then you want to make sure, especially for older adults, that you get your lean protein in. Lean protein, all right, per day, 5 to 6.5 ounces of lean protein. And I keep saying lean, and it's going to go back to what I was talking about, the dairy. So if we want less of that animal fat, we want to choose things like chicken breast, turkey breast. We want to choose plant-based foods. We want to choose fish, all right? So salmon, tuna, whitefish, choosing things like I said, chicken breast, eggs, lean protein. So we shave off a lot of that saturated heart unhealthy fat that's going to raise our bad cholesterol, all right? We want to make sure we have at least 2 servings of fish per week, so we can get those omega-3s in, which are going to be great for our brain, great for our cardiovascular health. And we want to make sure we save a little bit of room for the fun stuff, okay? So a tiny portion, if you see on that graphic, a tiny, tiny portion of our day, have a brownie, have some dark chocolate, have a glass of wine if that's what you want to use it for. But don't go crazy, all right? Moderation, but you will go crazy if you don't have this stuff, all right? And then, as you can see, I said eat the rainbow. And if you look under that vegetables part of the graphic, you see dark green vegetables, red and orange vegetables, you see starchy vegetables. I was just in the supermarket over the weekend and I bought like all different color peppers, red, green, orange, yellow. And guess what? They all taste differently, but I didn't buy them from the taste. I know that different colors have different antioxidants with different properties. And I know that there's requirements for me to eat dark green, red, all this orange, yellow, so on and so forth, because the colors are important. They are cancer fighters, all right? The pigments in the red and orange vegetables, without getting too deep into this, they help us see better. It's the pigment, it's the colors, all right? So eat the rainbow. And then, you know, we're gonna finish on 2 topics. We'll finish on some key nutrients and we'll finish on fluids, okay? So let's talk about some key nutrients that older adults are missing for the most part. And a lot of times that's not due to people just not eating the food. All right, so let's start with B12. Across the board, men and women, 60 plus, 2.4 micrograms daily for vitamin B12. Some places you can find this in: fortified cereals, eggs, yogurt, and also supplementation. But typically B12 is found in animal products. And if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, it's going to be hard for you to obtain that without being supplemented. More at-risk people are older adults because, number one, we actually maintain a pretty good store of B12 for a while, but older adults actually, it's harder for them to absorb it because of, again, digestion, just the aging process, and because of certain medications that may impede the absorption. So some people actually have to go as far as getting a B12 shot, which is really, it's like a booster. It picks you back up and gets you back where you need to go. But B12 deficiency actually can mimic neurological problems and dementia. So it's something to look out for as you get older. Then we have vitamin D, which most of this country is actually deficient in. And a lot of it's because, you know, it's colder around these parts and we don't get out in the sun enough, but also because there's not a lot of places we get it without supplementing. Okay, so, you know, we need a little bit less, 60 to 70 years old, but as we get older, because our bone health is so important, and osteopenia, osteoporosis, and the risk of fractures goes up greatly as we increase in age, you know, it is important to get enough vitamin D. So you can find this in salmon, egg yolk, fortified orange juice, and then again in supplementation. Calcium, again, those same reasons for vitamin D. We know vitamin D helps bring calcium into the bones, but we also need to make sure that we have calcium that's regulated both in our bones and in our bloodstream. They're both equally as important. All right, again, so females 60 plus, 1,200 milligrams across the board per day. Males 60 to 70 years old, 1,000. Males 71 plus, you have that 1,200 milligrams. And again, you know, you can find that calcium in dairy products, very high in soy products, but that's, you know, for older women can be a little bit controversial given we're not sure the safety of soy. Definitely find it in dark green leafy vegetables. And then supplementation is a big one. Then we have vitamin B6, all right? And so for vitamin B6, again, that's typically found in foods that are animal-based, all right? But it's involved in brain development, and it's involved in a bajillion, gajillion, just 100 enzyme reactions for metabolism. And we wanna make sure, again, that we're getting enough in, all right? So those are chicken, salmon, tuna, and obviously supplementation. And then the last two, I definitely have talked about before, omega-3 fatty acids for our brain and our heart health. ALA, DHA, EPA, I will not say their names. You've heard them in commercials. You've read about them. They're super long, but they're super important for you. And so if you want them, you can find them in salmon, tuna. You can take fish oil pills. You can take flaxseed or flaxseed oil pills. And then making sure you get your lean protein in, because we don't make sure we repair the muscle, we have less bone protection, and we always want to keep more muscle over fat on our body because that will help prolong our life. Jason told you about this on the exercise piece of this. And then sort of to wrap this up, we'll talk about fluids. This is the biggest population that is underhydrated. Older adults, I should say, I'm talking to you, your thirst sensation actually decreases significantly. And so older adults tend not to drink as much as they should to stay adequately hydrated. choosing water is the most important thing you can do, or unsweetened low-fat beverages, so 100% fruit or vegetable juice, or low-fat, fat-free milk, plant-based milks. But water, 1,000,000% of the time, is your first choice. If you are choosing beverages that are not water, choose water to match it. So if I have 16 ounces of diet soda, which I might do on occasion, I will have 16 ounces of soda to match that to make sure that I am still hydrated. All right. But, you know, everyone has different requirements. So if you are on a fluid restriction, you have kidney problems regulating your blood pressure, congestive heart failure, so on and so forth, you want to check with your doctor about your own sort of individual fluid guidelines. Coffee does not count. Coffee is a diuretic, will dehydrate you. Alcohol does not count. It is a diuretic and will dehydrate you. And our body typically just wants to get rid of the first poison it sees. So it doesn't matter how healthy that you eat throughout the day. The minute that you put alcohol in your body's just going to work to get rid of that alcohol. Doesn't really matter what other nutrition is in your body. But your guidelines are 2 drinks daily for most men, 1 drink daily for most women. Check with your doctors. Obviously aiming to drink at least 64 ounces fluid daily, more when you're active and when the weather's hot, and obviously fluid needs vary by individual. The water that you take in your food contributes as well. And obviously don't forget to have dessert in moderation. It's very important. You have to make yourself happy, have a brownie. All right, thank you everybody. That's where I end.
Thank you to both of you. If anybody has questions, feel free to ask questions. You can put them in the chat box. And also just to remind you, in the chat box is the evaluation. If you could complete that at the end, and also the link to get the recording from this. Does anybody have any questions?
When should you take the vitamin B12? And is it okay to take a B complex?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Excuse me. When should you take a vitamin B12? And is it okay when you take it to take it in a B complex?
Yeah, so you can take them at any time of the day. It doesn't matter. You just want to follow the instructions, obviously on the supplement. Yes, my mother asked me the same question actually. Yes, if you need vitamin B12, you can take it with a B complex. You just want to make sure it's not, the percentage that you get from the B complex and the B12 isn't like combining to overdo it. But
right.
You should be okay.
Thank you.
Hey, Jason, here's a question.
All right, Loretta, I'm going to answer your question. It says, for Jason, what is the appropriate hand weight for someone with osteoporosis? To be completely and totally honest, there is no right answer to this. I know that's probably not what you want to hear. However, everyone's going to be different with their current strength levels. So for one person, something as light as 2 pounds might be the appropriate starting weight. For somebody, 2 pounds could be way too easy and you need to start with 5 or 8 pounds. It really all comes down to how it feels for you. And quite frankly, a conversation that I have with people all the time is being honest about the amount of effort that you're putting out, and if what you're doing is actually inducing any change or inducing any recovery, meaning that oftentimes people downplay how strong they are. So if you can move the weight in your hand just as easy as you can pick up a bottle of soda and bring it to your mouth, you probably need to push yourself to go a little heavier. Now, if you go too heavy and it takes you 3 weeks to recover from the exercise because you're sore for 3 weeks, then that's kind of your telltale that it was probably a little too heavy. But being sore for 2 or 3 days after a workout is completely normal. So it's really the best thing I can do is say start light. If it doesn't feel challenging and it doesn't induce any kind of post-workout soreness, you probably need to increase if you're, starting at a very low weight. Start at 2 pounds, go to 5 pounds, go to 8 pounds, go to 10 pounds, go up in those increments until you find what is, challenging, is inducing some post-workout soreness, but isn't incapacitating you. So I hope that answers your question. All right. I don't know if we have any more.
Yeah, any more questions?
Jason,
Yes.
I'm 81. How often should I exercise per week?
So that's a good question. So there's two answers to this, which one is going to have to deal with cardiovascular exercise. When it comes to cardiovascular exercise, you're walking, you're cycling, you're swimming, things that are going to get your heart rate up and more so work your cardiovascular system. What we're doing is we're just shooting for a minimum of 90 minutes a week, however you want to break that up, with ideally being closer to 150 to 200 minutes a week, however you would like to break that up, okay? So say you're doing nothing right now, 90 minutes could be broken up into, it's not exact math, but it could be 4 25-minute bouts of walking or 3 30-minute bouts of walking. Anything that's going to add up to about 90 to 100 minutes is what I would recommend for starting. And then when we get closer to that 150 minutes, that could be 25 minutes every day, something like that. So that, once again, that stresses your cardiovascular portion of exercise. You're walking, you're hiking, you're biking, you're swimming, you're running, you're rowing, whatever you're doing for cardiovascular exercise. As far as resistance training is concerned, using either body weight or free weights or machines at a gym, if you're doing nothing, I recommend twice a week for 30 minutes, try to maybe get in 6 to 8 different exercises that, work your body top to bottom, legs, arms, back, chest. And as you become more accustomed to it, add days. So maybe, if you're doing none at all, start with 2 days. After a month, add a 3rd day. After another month or 2, add a 4th day. There's probably no real reason to go more than 4 or 5 days if you're over 60 for resistance training, unless you have, unless you're kind of in the elite athletic population of the over 60 crowd, and you're one of these over 60s who are still doing half marathons and triathlons and things like that. So I would say start with 2 days, work your way up to, about 4 days of 30 minutes of weight training, working the entire body.
Jason, is it the resistance bands good?
Resistance bands are great. It's a great way to, work out at home. Somebody asked me the other day, what's better, free weights or resistance bands or machines? And I said, there's no better. They're just different. It all does the same thing. A free weight, a band, a machine, it's just, all it is it's adding, increased gravitational pull to, that you're trying to resist. So, it's really, there's no best, there's just different. Okay.
All right. And I see Loretta asked a question, how many grams of protein are needed for women over 60? And again, that's super individualized, obviously, but if I'm giving a general statement, we look at things like probably a gram to 1.2 grams per kilogram. So what does that look like? Well, let's just say that I'll do this math real quickly. I'm 120 pounds, all right? I'm not, but I'm just gonna let you know. Let's just say I am. And 2.2 pounds per kilogram. So I have about 54.5 pounds. And so that's about where I would want to be with my protein intake for the general average. Grams, yeah. Yeah, but that's per kilo. I lied. Grams. I have somebody fact checking me next to me. Thank you, Jason. You're wonderful. But yeah, so if I was 54.5 kilograms, I would be then making sure I got at least 55 grams of protein per day. Now, most people will get more, but a general rule of thumb is to know that the palm of your hand is about 3 ounces of protein. And if you get about 3 ounces of, meat or chicken, turkey, fish, you should be around 21 to 25 grams of protein per that time eating. And so to make sure you get 3 ounces at least of protein per meal is a good start.